What's it like to be CEO of a billion-dollar software company? Well, today, on episode number 129 of CXOTalk, we are talking with Joe Cowan, who is the CEO of Epicor Software. We're going to talk about ERP. We're going to talk about the future of enterprise software. We have all kinds of enterprise goodness in store. I'm Michael Krigsman, and my co-host is Vala Afshar. Vala, how are you?
I'm doing great, Michael, and I'm excited to learn from Joe today. Welcome, Joe.
Thank you. I'm glad to be part of your show today.
Joe, can you start with briefly telling us a little bit about your professional background, please?
Okay, be glad to. I'm kind of maybe a unique person to be doing the role I'm doing. I'm a degreed engineer. I have a BSEE degree, electrical engineering degree from Auburn University, and a master's degree from Arizona State. And I started my career programming computers, and we won't even talk about what that was like. But then went into sales and marketing, and loved dealing with customers, loved solving problems. I'm a problem solver. And then I've had the opportunity to run many different software companies, all the way back to Interwoven, which was actually sold to Autonomy, which is now part of HP, and ran a company called Manugistics, was supply chain planning. Ran another company that was in the online banking and bill pay business. That's where I learned about my SaaS business. Actually, I ran another little company once upon a time called Wonderware, which really taught me the concept of ease of use and how to build solutions that are simple and easy to use for customers. So, Ben, it's a career I've thoroughly enjoyed.
So, Joe, tell us about Epicor, the company, the markets you're serving. Give us some context for our conversation.
Okay, glad to, Michael. Well, like I say, we started out, you said Epicor is roughly $1 billion company. We are a software company that has solutions where we sell into a manufacturing marketplace. We sell into distribution, and we also have some retail solutions. But we're what we call a total solution provider. At the core of everything we do is software, but then we provide the basic services to help our customers really utilize the software. And the real key to Epicor in our business is the fact that we are vertically focused. We tend to deal in the mid-market, companies that can go anywhere from 50 million to 500 million in size. And, it's important to really understand who your customers are, what their problems are, what their challenges are. And, and that's what we pride ourselves in, is that deep, rich domain knowledge that allows us to really understand and help our customers to be successful.
Can you talk to us, Joe, a little bit about your target market and what makes Epicor distinct in the market?
Yeah, it's a good question. The target markets are things like, when we say manufacturing, well, we have selected markets, things like plastic, things like machinery manufacturing, things like we saw also into the automotive parts manufacturing space. We sell into some chemical. So we tend to focus on the more heavily into the discrete parts. But the key thing there is, if you look at the heritage of the company, this is where the company grew from. We grew from small companies that solve problems in those industries. We're a bunch of acquisitions that came together, and now that gave us that deep, rich vertical knowledge, so that our software is very focused on the problems of those selected industries, and the knowledge we have from an implementation, even a sales standpoint. We also have distribution capabilities. Let's say you want to put in a new bathroom in your home, so you want to go look at bathroom countersinks, faucets, flooring, so you'll go to one of these wholesale distributors that sells all of that. And we provide a total solution for those types of companies. And then even in the retail side, it gets into what we call hard goods, retailer distribution. You go into an Ace Hardware, the majority of the Ace stores actually use a total Epicor solution to run their business. So we're very focused, and that's the key to our success, is knowledge and focus of the selected industries that we serve.
So, Joe, tell us about your role as CEO. So you're the Chief Executive Officer. What exactly does that mean?
Well, I guess you can say I'm the head man at the top of the totem pole, which has got its good points and its bad points. That means the buck stops here. But basically, I brought in, and we're owned by private equity. I have worked for both public companies and private equity firms. But so they brought me in and said, look, Joe, we think we've got a great asset, which they do. Epicor is a great company. And they said, but we believe this company has a lot more potential. Excuse me. So as CEO, I brought in to really understand the company, understand our strengths and our weaknesses, understand the marketplace and the competition, and put together the right strategy and plan to really take this company to the next level. What I like to tell people, I brought in to take the company from being a good company to being a great company. So my role as CEO is understand that strategy, put an operational plan together, and then go execute that plan that will allow us to accomplish those objectives.
Do you want to maybe summarize briefly what that strategy is for Epicor to take it from being a good company to a great company?
Good question. You know, strategy is one of the hardest things that a CEO has to work on. So what I've done is I've gone into the company and I've said, let's look at who we really are. Let's look at what our real strengths are, because the key thing you want to do is you want to match your strengths up to the marketplace. And that's where early on I said, you know, we're very good in certain verticals. So our concept is let's take the verticals that we're good in, let's focus into those industries. Let's make sure that that's where our sales team is really selling. You know, that's where our services people have the knowledge. So it's that deep vertical focus so we can truly be the best of breed supplier into those companies. And we can be the best partner. Our goal is to help them succeed. The next thing is to look at technology. Now, the interesting thing about Epicor, the company had spent quite a bit of money developing a next generation ERP system, which we call E9E10. So what the goal there is to take that technology and really make sure that it's totally complete to solve those problems. But we're not a technology company per se. We're a software company who leverages technology to solve problems. So the real thing is to leverage the technology, make sure we understand where technology is going, and then build those rich vertical applications in the markets that we're serving. So that's more or less what that strategy is. And then make sure that everything we do has a foundation of quality. You know, I learned a long time ago that for a software company to be successful, there better be quality. Quality in your products, quality in your services, when customers call. And that's an area that we've really been focusing on to make sure that that is the solid foundation.
Joe, you and your team have made an effort to hire military veterans, which I think is awesome. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, you know, we about a year and a half ago, not a year and a half, about 15 months ago at our customer event, we announced that we were supporting the Wounded Warriors. You know, I feel very strong about the fact that these people have dedicated, you know, their lives, and in some cases they've given their lives, but, you know, these people were willing to go out and risk it all for this nation. And I felt, you know, as a CEO of the company, the least I could do is let's go offer some opportunities for those people. There's numerous ways we can do that, but rather than just trying to say we want to bring everybody in and, you know, non-experienced people who start at the bottom, we've tried to go in and get people who've had some very unique knowledge that we could bring in and really plug into the organization. You know, we'll bring them into sales roles, but especially in professional services, these people have a lot of, you know, they're very good from what I call a program or project management capability, because the federal government, the military is very organized, and so we put them into those roles where we can take full advantage of their capabilities and start delivering real value to us. And we've hired dozens of veterans that way, and I don't even know how many we've got in the company. It's probably somewhere between 50 and 100. So we have quite a few, and we're continuing to hire, and I'm continuing to push this because I really believe it.
And so, Joe, do you have a training program, or how do you get them to adapt their project management skills that they learned in the military, which obviously is such an enormous organization, into Epicor, which as a private company is much smaller?
Well, you know, we'll bring, and typically when you hire these people, they're usually some very bright people. So we'll bring them in like to our professional services organization, And we have a program to bring them up to speed, to get them familiar with our products, to get them familiar with how we do business. So we do have a training program and for our professional services. And, you know, each area, the managers that we bring them into have the role of the overall ownership. We don't have what I call a generic training program across the company, because we're bringing in more experienced people, so we'll bring them into their specific areas, and we have an individual program specified in each of those areas.
Joe, that's great. Thank you so much for your background and the company background. Sounds like you're doing fantastic work. But I'm going to shift the conversation a little bit towards technology and products and solutions that you sell. So let's start with, what is ERP?
Well, you know, ERP is basically, it's pretty simple in the way I view it. It's the backbone of how manufacturing and distribution companies run their business. You know, it's their financial system, it's their planning systems, it's the ability for them to take orders, it's the ability for them to ship. So it's really the backbone or the business solution for the companies. And that's the real simple way to put it.
And then briefly take us through the history of ERP. Again, what we want to do is set context for the people who are watching.
Well, now you're going to make me talk about my age.
I think you're not the only one here who has some remembrance of companies who have been around in the past and aren't around today.
Yeah, so, but yeah, it goes back a long way. I can remember starting with my days at Monsanto, and you know, back then you didn't have the big gigantic financial systems, and we had to basically create our own business solutions from scratch. So early on, it started out with companies piecing together the business solutions. You know, then you had the IBMs of the world who got into the business, and different companies. I know a lot of the basic foundational ERP solutions today is really stemming from some of those earlier IBM solutions where they built some of the first standard products. You know, then you started moving into the issue of Y2K, and that really drove a lot, where now you had the Oracle and the SAPs of the world, and even some of the companies like the Bonds of the world that you know, developed their solutions to solve those Y2K problems, and that moved us to really the next generation products that got us more from the mainframes into the client servers. And you know, now I think we're entering the next phase of ERP, and really where that drives us to is what's going to happen with cloud, the SaaS, and your technologies. You know, I was just looking at some information the other day that was talking about the number of companies that utilize the web, and it's tremendous in the last 10 years, the number of people, and all of our business are starting to leverage it, and the number of people who use mobile. So the whole technology is now starting to play. So how do we use these technologies? Everybody hears about cloud. How do we use those to create those next generation systems? But each phase of the cycle, I think what we're seeing is systems that tend to try to be more specific. They tend to try to solve a better job of solving the problem. I won't say they're easier to use, because we went through a real cycle where they weren't. But I think we're starting to enter a phase where customers are starting to demand that says, I need systems that don't take me 5 or 10 years. You know, we were talking to a major chemical company the other day, and they were talking about what they're looking for in their next generation system. And their approach is, you know, we can't afford in one of our plants to spend 3 years making a change to our ERP system, because the dynamics of the market we're in global markets. Our products change too fast. Our manufacturing processes need to change to adapt our business. So we've got to have systems that are more configurable, more adaptable, that we can implement much faster, much quicker. So this is where I see the market driving to, from those first custom systems back many, many years ago, to all the standard systems, the client servers, the gigantic systems. Now we're starting to use the more cloud-based solutions, you know, component-based solutions that tend to integrate together and allow the customers a lot more flexibility in terms of their business processes.
So Joe, in terms of points of innovation for ERP for the next few years, can you talk a little bit more about that? Sounds like agility, dynamic solutions, flexibility, cloud-oriented solutions seems to be part of the roadmap, but can you specifically talk about some key innovation points for ERP in the next 5 years?
Yeah, good question. You know, in some ways you have to kind of look at it and say whether you're the large company or you tend to be a small company. So it may vary some, but let's talk kind of general, and then maybe I'll give you some specifics of I think it kind of breaks apart. You know, it's obvious that the latest technologies, I mean, let's talk about things like mobile. Everybody's connected now. Absolutely everybody's connected. Matter of fact, this survey that I was looking at was showing the number of smartphone users, and it's just going up exponential. And so everybody is connected now. They have a smartphone. If I'm a businessman, I want to know what's going on with my business. I want to know in real time. So I think this is one of the things we have to look at in technology, and your systems have to have the ability to let the owners of the businesses to stay connected, to know what's happening with the business. The second thing that we're starting to see is, and I'll give you an example. The other day, I had a lock on my gate that was bad. So I went online, and there was the name of the manufacturer on that lock. So I went online and looked at their website and said, okay, that's what I want. Then my challenge was finding a distributor that had it, okay? And so I had to do a lot of research. But I think what we're starting to see, and our customers are starting to tell us, Joe, we need to be more connected with our customers, our potential customers. You know, they all have the web technologies. People are all research. That's how you find out about companies. So they got to make sure that that whole capability is there. But now how can I connect with my customers and my supply chain so that I can do things much quicker, much faster, and make it much simpler for my customers to do business? So again, we're seeing that technology. Then I think a third component is technology changes, and change is hard. You know, every so many years, new servers and Microsoft or Oracle come out with new versions of the operating systems. And sometimes these things are not easy for small companies, let's talk small now, to really adapt to, because it requires a lot of change, a lot of energy. They want to run their businesses. They want solutions to help them manage their business. So that's where things like the cloud will start playing. So they don't have to worry about some of those technologies. They can let companies such as the Epicors of the world deal with that and provide those solutions. And then I think the final piece of this is information. You know, information is so key to running my business. It's key to running their business. So with all of these systems, with all of the connectivity, with the way they're tied into everything, all the customer data coming in, how do I manage my business much better? So that's where having the right information and the ability to analyze and use that, and use it with all the connection points from a real-time standpoint. That's where I see technology taking the business. You know, and I think it's going to require companies like us to really think through how to leverage this to the advantage or benefit of our customers.
Joe, when I speak with ERP buyers, especially in the mid-market, but at larger companies as well, the common theme across the industry is this perception that ERP is difficult, and again, especially with buyers from mid-market companies, oftentimes they're just on the fence. Should they even do this because of the perceived pain? Again, it's across the ERP industry. So what causes this, and what do companies like Epicor need to do to just make it easier for buyers?
You know, that's a very good question. To be honest with you, when I go in and talk to customers, that's one of the first questions they want to talk about. Gosh, can I really afford to go down this path? Because it is very costly. It is problematic in most cases. And, you know, and that's something that we're focused on all the time in Epicor. The problem tends to be that I think it's twofold. One is we see a lot of our customers or potential customers, they've got a certain way of doing business. They've got, you know, their processes are well defined. A lot of times they'll say, I don't want to change. I want to get a system that can do things my way. So the thing that we want to do is, you know, we want to go in and try to understand exactly how they run their business and help them. And I think it's a joint team. They've got to be committed to it. We have to be committed to it. But let's understand where there's things that they can change. these systems, some things are easier to do. We've got standard processes built in. So can they take something standard that we've already got defined and use it versus having to customize? Look at all the third-party integrations they have and find out how we can simplify that. And some of it comes back to having tools that are simple, more configurable to use. You know, I mentioned Wonderware when I talked about my experience. You know, Wonderware was a very interesting company. We built in Wonderware manufacturing floor systems that managed and monitored machines and allowed users to operate the machinery on the factory floor that integrated into the ERP systems. Today, you may call some of this MES. But what we understood, really mastered, was how to make those systems flexible but simple to use. And there's things like configuration. There's things like having standard interfaces. Let's say one of our customers wants to interface into CRM. So Salesforce will build a standard interface rather than customizing it. So those are the kind of things that we can do for them so that you don't have all that engineering, all that customization, all that special configuration, pre-canned reports. And that's where the vertical knowledge that we have comes into play. Because if we understand, then we can pre-build and pre-do these things. And then we'll work with them to say, okay, what exactly do you need to do? And let's also start and not try to do everything at one time. Let's stage it one thing at a time. You know, let's get the financials working. Let's get the planning system working. So let's go step at a time and not try to bite off too much and stay very focused in terms of what we're doing. Okay?
Joe, business leaders in IT and other lines of business have an opportunity to identify clearly on ERP implementations, and that sometimes can be a challenge. What advice do you have for line of business owners who are trying to formulate and clearly articulate ROI on ERP implementations?
Well, you know, it's everybody, all of us do it. Anytime I put in a new system and we're implementing new systems, I always want an ROI calculation. Sometimes that's pretty easy to do. Sometimes it's not. You know, sometimes there's other real benefits that go beyond it. For example, if I put in a new support system, one of the things I talk about is I want to have better quality. A customer might put in a system, in response time, how fast can my customers interface to my system, or how fast can they get data, or how fast can, you know, just like in the case I talked about, if they had a system that allowed me to enter the order rather than going and finding that distributor. So some of these things, there's other benefits, and I think you have to weigh both the soft and the hard benefits. But usually, and again, I think this is where cloud comes in, because sometimes some of these costs are the fact that, especially with small companies, I got to go have an expert in communications, I got to have a computer expert, a database expert, so I need all these professionals inside of my company, and that's very costly to me. So sometimes if I'm looking and saying I want to go cloud, I can look and say, can I use third parties such as an Epicor to do some of this for me? So I think they have to look at their systems, the cost of the system, have to look at the benefits. Sometimes it requires them to have fewer people, you know, doing invoices, processing receivables. Sometimes from a manufacturing standpoint, it allows them to reduce inventories because they do a better job managing the supply chain and optimizing the supply chain. So there's both hard and soft. So I think, and what we'll do, we'll sit down with our customers and say, based on our knowledge and understanding, these are the areas that you should look at. Let us help you do that, and let us show you all the different areas that we've seen other customers do. One of the things I'm really pushing for at our user events is to have more customers to come in and talk about, here's the real value proposition for my ERP system, so that they can look at both the hard and the soft.
Joe, you know, again, when I sit down with potential ERP buyers, oftentimes it seems like what's happening is the people inside people in the trenches doing the work feel the need to have an ERP system to have greater efficiency, greater productivity, all of the benefits that we know come from ERP. But then you talk with the CEO of the company, and the CEO may say, hey, yeah, we could do things a little bit better, but it's not going to really change things. What's the ROI? How do you, so there's a disconnect between the people doing the work and the senior management of the company. How do you bridge that gap? How do you help your customers bridge that gap so that they, when they're buying, when they're looking at an ERP system?
That's a very good point. You tend to see where it's small companies or large companies. In small companies, we were just talking this morning with some of my team about how we're dealing with a lot of people who are owners of the business. That's the CEO, and they're technology people. And so now when they look at the solution, they've got real skin in the game because this is dollars out of their pocket. So they really want to understand that there's real value. Typically, when you see a case like that, a lot of times the projects start at that level. We want to interface to those people. We need to make them feel comfortable with what the real benefit of the system is. They need to feel comfortable that we're a partner that's going to be there with them to help them truly be successful. And then, once we get into the IT organizations, we get into some of the operational people, you tend to get in more of the feature function of the system. But I think we have to be careful that we don't get down there and sell feature function, that we really move to the level of the owners or the senior managers and help them really understand the benefit. And then I think one of the things I think is very important, and that's what I'm pushing my organization to do, is, we want the customers to understand that our goal is not to make them continue to buy software, more and more software, and to be in the business of buying software. Their real responsibility and what they're desiring to do is to do things like grow their business. They want to fix some of those operational problems that keep them from growing, or they want to go do acquisitions. So what I tell my people, we're there to help them grow. If we've got software and solutions that can help them do that, then that's a win-win for both parties. And that's the approach we're really focused on: value proposition, win-win, help them achieve their objectives. And that's what I'm focusing my people to do more of, this value selling.
Joe, so far, you've talked about cloud computing. You referenced the connected customer with mobile and social technologies. Obviously, the goal of business is to capture as much data and analytics so that they can develop insights that add real value to the business and their customers and employees. These are all elements of a transformational journey to a digital business. Can you talk to us a little bit about the Epicor journey of becoming even more of a digital business, and give us some examples?
Okay. Well, this is the area that we spend a lot of time in. In fact, I was just talking to my chief technology officer this morning about technology and where it's going, talking to my chief strategy person about, where we're going. And the thing that I focus on, and I've talked about some of it earlier, is to really understand technology and to understand what the technology allows us to do, and to understand how we can take that technology and create solutions for our customers. One of the areas that we're really focused on now is, we call it a mobile platform. And we have a lot of different products. Most companies like us have many different products. So how do you really create a common solution across these products? So we look at something like a mobile platform, and we'll build applications off of that mobile platform that integrate to all of our legacy systems. So what we try to do is understand and create that common solution to our customers. Another area in the technology, which is this whole thing with cloud. I mean, there's a lot of companies that are now looking and saying, what is cloud? My son and I have this debate at dinner a lot of times about SaaS. But some of these are really business models. It's how the customers want to do business. We go into our customers and we say, do you want to buy the software, or would you like to pay by the month, or pay by the transaction? Some of these give companies different business models in different ways. And so what we're doing as a company is we're trying to understand what is the right business model for our customers. that help them to really accomplish their objectives. So some of these technologies like the cloud, it's really the business model, and it takes away some of this infrastructure cost that they have. So there can be real advantages. Rather than paying upfront or hiring expensive people, they can pay over time and accomplish the objectives. Sometimes it allows them to start simpler, and then if they grow into it, they can go buy the software. Sometimes if it's private equity owners, they don't want the cost up front. They'd rather go in and have a solution like a cloud. Then we get in this whole data world. One of the things that we're doing, we do it internally, but we also look at our customers, is how can they leverage and use data? One of the challenges, I used to work in a company for a small period of time in big data. And big data is something that everybody talks about, but how do we make it simple and easy to use? Because people don't want to go get into the sophistication of all kinds of analytics. I worked with Manugistics, and we used to talk about 27 algorithms you could do anything with, but it takes a PhD in operations research to use those. So one of the things we're really focused on is how I can create standard analytical tools and standard reports and standard functions so that I can do my planning. Because all ERP systems, people need to do their planning. They need to do some analysis on their data. They need to look at history. They need to do their forecasting. So how do we take these and make them simple and easy to use so they get the advantage of using big data, but it's brought down to their level and their capabilities and abilities. So those are the things that we really look to try to help our customers solve the problems and take full advantage of the technology. But we try to do it in a simple way. So we take the complexity of the technology out and we present the simplicity of the solution, to our customers.
Joe, you mentioned business models, and as CEO of a software company that sells both on-premise as well as cloud software, in some sense you're managing two different business models under one roof. The economics are quite different. So how do you inside Epicor manage these competing interests, in a sense, of these two different business models of cloud and on-premise for yourself running your own company?
You asked some very good questions, and that is a debate that we have. To be frank with you, it's a discussion that I have with my owners, because they are two different business models, and they do impact exactly from a business standpoint, how we perform. So what we do, and this is where I come back, one of the things I did in my career is I took spent the 2 years with this little company called Online Resources, totally out of character for where I would normally go, because it was the payments and the banking business. And my background is primarily, supply chain, ERP, distribution. But I went there because I wanted to truly learn what SaaS is all about, because we had a pure SaaS business model. And so from that standpoint, and I've got a couple of people, my CTO and my marketing lady, were with me there, so we understand these dynamics very well. So what we've set up until now is, look, Mr. Customer, Miss Customer, if you want to buy our software, we'll sell it to you. But if you'd like us to run in the SaaS model, which is really a monthly subscription model, we'll do it that way. So that's the way we've been doing up until now. I think as we go forward, there's going to be certain solutions, I know, there will be certain solutions, maybe for a certain size customer, that we strongly recommend that we think you should, the preference for you should be to go the route of the SaaS or the cloud, because we think it's less complex, less sophisticated for you, and it's also simpler. We can come up to implementation curve faster, and we can give you returns quicker and simplify some of your problems in this. We think there's a class of customers, and that's one of the areas that we're working on now, to understand how to segment our customer base in our business to do that. There'll be other customers that will still continue to give them the choice. So what we'll do is we'll look at some customers where we think it makes good business sense for them to go to SaaS. We'll look at other customers that will say we'll give you the choice. But one of the things that we're doing is we're building our infrastructure so that we could go totally to the cloud. One of the things that I came in, we had quite a few data centers when I came in the company. we've consolidated those. We've got our data center set up all the world. We've got our infrastructure. We're putting our systems in place. We're hiring our operational people so that literally we could become a total cloud-based solution if we so chose, because we'll have the infrastructure ability. And then the final component of this that really plays into this is the ability to deliver software that works in the cloud or SaaS environment. One of the things that we understood with the last company we were with is you have to have a very quick cadence. I need the ability every 2 to 3 weeks to turn software that I can send to my customers. It has to be very high quality. You've got to have the ability to deliver that software, at a very fast frequency into our customers, so that we can give all these different customers the choices and move new customers on very quickly. So we're putting the right systems and cadence into the company to deliver. We're building the infrastructure to deliver, and then we'll have the business models that match up to our different customers in the different markets.
Do you have an economic or other bias towards your customers purchasing either on-premise or cloud?
Well, we all know that if you purchase the software, I get the money up front, and if it's cloud and a subscription, it tends to go over time. So everybody would say, I'd rather get the money up front, but you have to realize the market is changing. The market is moving. I can't always dictate markets. As a company, I have to be willing, I have to be flexible and be willing to go with the market. And that's the way we're going to succeed the best. Okay?
Joe, let's talk about market moving and shifting. Let's talk a little bit about retail. You have now, Amazon's got a bigger market cap than Walmart. You have the implication of wearables and beacons and Internet of Things. Of course, everyone is checking prices online and the showrooming effect in brick and mortar retail. You chose to spin off Epicor's retail business into a new company. Can you talk to us a little bit about your view of this disruptive nature of the retail industry and how companies like Epicor can help organizations withstand this enormous velocity of change that retailers are facing?
Yeah, that's a very good question, and the challenge that we tend to face with RSG, which is what we call the Retail Systems Group, was that the business tended to sell to, it was a different customer. We had different sales organizations, we had different products, and there was just a totally different market and a totally different way to sell to those companies. The retailers that we sold tend to be much larger companies. There were very few customers. On the Epicor side, we have about 20,000. On that side, we have about 600 or 700. So it was a different business model. And we found the solutions we were selling, software, was a different software for the typical Epicor customer versus the RSG customer. So that made sense to spin that off and allow them to get some economies of scale and focus and maybe do some things with that business. That's the reason we chose to do that. We still have a retail business, which is we used to call it the RBG, the hard goods retail business, which was we sell into the places like Ace Hardware, which is more, if you think about a distribution, it's a different type of sale. It's not color, size, and style, but it's hammers and saws and nuts and bolts. So it tends to be a different type of business. But what we're finding, and from that standpoint, if I really think about that, a lot of our manufacturing business are job shops where they'll go in and produce things. They may produce locks, they may produce custom locks, they may produce certain kinds of machinery that's used in the marketplace, or they may produce hammers. But what we tend to see is all of our customers are starting to look, whether it be a hardware store or whether it be a manufacturing company, they're starting to say, distribution. How do I distribute my products to my customers? Remember, early on, I talked about the fact that I went online to try to buy a lock for my gate, and I found a lock with a manufacturer. Then I had to go find a distributor. We see this whole e-commerce thing is where the market's going. Every one of our customers want to be plugged in, whether it's a retail customer or a manufacturing customer or distribution. We've got a lot of manufacturing customers that say, I want to do distribution. We've got a lot of distribution customers that say, I want to do manufacturing. So how do we bring these solutions together, and how do we leverage the web, e-commerce? How do we take full advantage of that and give them the ability to better communicate with their customers much quicker, much faster? You know, if we look at the supply chain side, how do they work with, and you know, this is where some of the social networks and the blogs can come in. How do they work with their network of suppliers to make sure that they're interacting and receiving their products more focused in terms of what they need and much quicker and much faster? So these are all the things that that we're doing, and that's where the retail and the distribution tend to come together, is at that whole area of e-commerce.
So, Joe, we're almost out of time, but before we go, please share your advice for buyers who are considering an ERP purchase, as well as your advice for running a smooth, successful ERP implementation.
Okay, two very good questions. You know, for any customer who's considering a new ERP solution, I think the thing they need to really do is, A, look at the different companies out there and say, okay, here's who I am, here's what I'm trying to accomplish, and go find a company that has a solution that matches well to them. You know, you can buy generic systems that, you know, they'll solve maybe one component like financials, but they're not very good when it comes to the manufacturing component or the distribution component. So I think what they need to do is say, analyze the marketplace and say, who are the software or the solutions providers that really have a solution that matches up to what I'm trying to accomplish. And I think that's first and foremost. Then I think they need to look and say, because we're seeing a lot of companies that are global. And so the question, and you know, like we sell to a lot of, frankly today, $250 to $500 million companies that may have 3 or 4 plants in the U.S., you know, they may have 1 in France, 1 in Germany, you know, 2 in China, and 1 somewhere else. So they're really not U.S.-centric companies, they're global companies. So if you're picking a system, you need to go and make sure you have a global company, someone who sells solutions globally, someone who understands the problems of dealing in all these different countries, and who can support me globally. So I think that's the second thing, is understanding the global nature of the business. I think another thing that they need to look to and say, what is the business model that I want to run? Do I want to license my software and pay by the month, or do I want to pay for it up front and just do a capital project? So they've got to understand how they want to do, where the, you know, look at their cash flows, look at their money, and understand how they want to go do it, you know, with the business. But then, first and foremost, I think they need to look and say, I need a partner that really understands me, not just has software that looks like it fits for my solution, but I need a partner that really understands me. And then they need to make sure, and this is the key, and we see a lot of people fall short in this area. If you're committed to spend the dollars, and even if you're going to do it by the month, you're still spending the time and dollars. You've got to have a team. You've got to be committed. You know, you've got to be willing to make some changes and to drive your business. And it takes a strong team effort, a strong partnership between the supplier and the manufacturer or the distribution company. And they've got to be joined at the hip. It's not going to always go smooth. Our goal is to try to make it go as smooth as possible, to build the systems that are easy to use. But depending on what that customers want to do, there may be some tough integration. There may be some things they want to do that require some extra work. So the key is working together as a team and realizing that there will be challenges, there will be problems, but if they're focused together and they're committed to drive down this path, then at the end result, there will be success. And the other thing, don't bite off too much at one time. Stage your programs. Figure out how you can get the biggest payback the quickest way possible. Do that piece first. And then go do the next piece, the next piece, the next piece. Do it in stages. You know, focus on success. Don't try to put it all in at one time. And make sure you plan plan well. That's my recommendation.
That's terrific advice, Joe. My final question to you is, I'm wondering, do you sell mostly to IT or the business? And if it's IT, are the CIOs more or less involved in terms of engaging with Epicor for ERP implementations?
You know, we sell heavy into the IT organizations. With the smaller companies, you're always going to have the CIO. The larger you get, you could potentially not, but usually, if you're doing an ERP implementation, that is important enough to the company that the companies we deal with, the CIO is always going to be, is always going to be part of that solution. Part of that decision. So
I know, Joe. We really appreciate your joining us because I know that you have you've been sick, and your voice is. I'm glad we're just about done. So I'm glad that your voice has lasted this long.
Yeah. If you had tried to do this last Monday of a week ago, you wouldn't have seen my mouth move, but nothing would come out.
You've been great.
Yeah,
You've been
great. Well, we're just about out of time, anyways. If you have enough voice left to give us a brief sales pitch about Epicor, you can do that if you want.
I'll give you a quick sales pitch and tell you about what I'm trying to do at Epicor. The thing with Epicor is we've got some basic things that we're trying to accomplish with the company, and it starts off with really delivering quality. One of the things that I really preach to my organization, and sometimes I can get pretty passionate about this, but is the quality of our products and our services. I'm always striving. We're never as good as we can be. And I always tell our people, if you don't strive for perfection, you will never achieve perfection. And we're not there today, but we're working on it. I brought in Jeff Tisling, a new CTO. And I know Jeff very, very well. Jeff is a genius in software. He knows how to build quality software. I've talked to our services people. We've made a lot of changes there. And we're doing it because I want to make sure that when the sales guy goes and sells, that we have the ability to deliver what we sold, what we committed, and doing it in a quality way. So quality, and I just had a conversation with my management team the other day, not my management, a lot of the employees. And I told them, I said, I want you to put yourself in the customer's position every time you deal with a customer. You ask yourself, is that how I would want it to have been treated? Is that the response I would have wanted to receive? So we're very, very focused on this issue of quality, about who we are, about our brand. We're very focused on, we've got a new tagline we're coming out with. And that tagline is really talking about, growing your business, not your software. And that's what our message to our customers is we're here to work with you to grow your business and to help you be successful. Our focus is not to just go sell you a bunch of software, but if we can create value for you and help you be successful, then we're going to sell you the software. So it's all about our customer, it's all about quality, it's all about value, and then the final component about who we are is how we personally leverage technology and make technology simple for our customers to use. So that's the three legs of the stool when I talk about who Epicor is in relationship to how we're trying to do business in the market.
Well, thank you so much. Vala, we learned a lot about the inner workings of an ERP software vendor today.
It's about growing your business, not your software. I love that. Well done, Joe.
And helping the customers, putting the customer first.
Absolutely. Terrific sage advice. Thank you.
So we have been talking today with Joe Cowan, who is the CEO of Epicor Software, one of the dominant ERP providers out there in the market. Joe, thank you so much for taking the time today.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
And everybody, thanks for watching. Joe, I hope you'll come back another time, and we really appreciate it. And That would be wonderful. And Vala, to you, I hope you have a great week.
You as well. Thank you, Michael. And Joe, you were terrific. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everybody.